So just to give a little background about this kind of class and this project, it is based on the Mentors in Violence Prevention Program, which was founded quite a few years ago in the Boston area, and it involved a lot of like male college athletes going into schools or community centers or sports teams and mentoring younger males. From there, it's kind of morphed into obviously female partnerships, but really just kind of looking at how violence against women can be addressed. So this class, why we're all here, is based on kind of bystander strategies. So we are all bystanders, and kind of how can we ourselves work to address this, and especially specifically for this group as educators, how can we work to address this and work with the youth? So we're going to start with introductions, even though we all know each other. But if you can go around, we'll start over here. Just say your name, say your position, your role, and what age group you work with.
Okay, my name is Sarah Mickle, and I teach high school choir and music appreciation.
Very nice. All right, I'll go. I'm Grace Connors. I work in nonprofits. I've worked with K-12 in a variety of education, museum, nonprofit settings.
My name is Darby Malvey. I'm a media specialist librarian. Right now I work with 6th through 12th graders, and that's in the school setting, but I have worked in public libraries with younger children as well.
My name is Aubrey Frainer. I am a speech therapist. I've worked in the private practice in the school setting, and I work from 18 months to 22 years old.
It's a big range.
Yeah, big range.
My name is Alexis Kilduff. I am a licensed professional counselor, and I work with 6th through 12th graders, which is like 11 to 20, depending on a number of factors. I also do in-home therapy, and I've done outpatient and worked in other settings as well, where I've worked with kids as young as like 4 or 5. So I've seen adults as well, and a large range of humans.
Nice. Humans in general. All right, we're going to do like a quick little icebreaker, just a question. But to preface and just kind of set the space in the environment, safe space, obviously. We'll go into a few things that have to do with gender roles and sexual harassment. If anyone has issues or feels uncomfortable, feel free to excuse yourself. So my quick icebreaker question, and I'm curious, this group of lovely females. When you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
A first grade teacher.
There we go.
And this was one of my students, my hypothetical student.
Oh my God.
She didn't have a choice.
Very unruly. I wanted to be a pediatrician.
Believe it or not, I used to tell everyone that I was going to be the first female president.
Amazing.
I saw.
Wow.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't remember what I wanted to be. I don't know. I just never had a dream, I guess. But I remember, like, I don't know.
Well, now you don't have to feel bad like me that you did not come anywhere close to becoming the first female president.
Oh, I had no expectations, so I succeeded. But I do remember, like, my cousin wanted to be a teacher, and she is a teacher now, and I had a friend who wanted to be a vet, so I don't know. I remember those things. I don't remember what I wanted to be, though. I think I wanted to be a whole bunch of different things.
There we go. That's great.
Up through my second year of college, I was going to be a doctor. That was always my plan.
All right.
Did not pan out.
Oh, that's okay. All right, keep those in mind.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to kind of take a quick step back to what I mentioned before. This class is based on. The name of the class is called Bystander Strategies. To just kind of touch on what it means to be a bystander, whether that's a negative or positive thing, and kind of what that looks like depending on the situation or the group. And I'm going to kind of throw a situation out there that I want to hear some feedback on. I'm sure some of us may have encountered this before, but let's say you're on Patco, you're on a train going into Philly, and you see a woman on this train that's being harassed by a man. What do you do? What do you see as your obligation to address this? We don't have to go in order, you can just kind of popcorn style. What is your obligation to address this issue?
I think, realistically, I would probably look at all the other people on the train and try to, like, get group of people to try to like see the situation, then maybe we can all go and attack the situation, because I would not feel comfortable doing it myself.
I agree. Like, the difference between what I feel like I know I
Should
do, what's the right thing to do, and like what I feel safe and comfortable doing are definitely two different things. In my mind, I would like love to be the person that jumps up and is like, stop that, I
Right.
see you. But like the potential to then put myself in harm's way leaves me feeling kind of like what Aubrey said, like hopefully I wouldn't be the only one.
Yeah, I think it speaks volumes that you kind of like use the word safe and comfortable in that situation, like as a female, that's something that's always on your mind, my safety and what's going to make sure that I remain safe.
I feel like there's also been times, not necessarily on like public transit, but where I've seen things going on, and instead of being like confrontational, I might do something where, like, if it's a friend of mine, I'll like grab them and be like, oh, let's go dance over here, like not by this person, like do something that like doesn't necessarily address what's going on specifically, but does something that feels safe for both me and whoever I feel like is in possible danger.
Yeah, and I feel like if it were a stranger who was being harassed, I'd be a lot more likely, a lot more apt to, once that harasser goes away, to go up and speak with them. You know, you try to comfort them, you know, tell them, you know, try to get them in the right kind of mindset. I think that's more my personality than to be the hero and like step in as it's happening.
Definitely. I think we all kind of have this like universe of obligation when it comes to, as bystanders, seeing something like this happen. What is our responsibility? What is our obligation to kind of step in and help, and what effect can that have? But I feel like what I heard from everyone that spoke was a lot of our feelings about this came from us being females and kind of how we would address this.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I think that was definitely a big thing. So I just kind of wanted to start it with that conversation about bystanders in general, because I think it kind of sets the tone for this class and kind of leads into the next topic, which is gender roles, which we all talk about on like a daily basis anyway. So we're gonna do something now where you can agree, disagree, or say unsure. So I'm gonna ask this question. If you agree, I'll ask that first and you can share. If you disagree, I'll ask next, you can share. If you're unsure, that's fine. So the question here is it okay to use the word bitch in a joking manner? Who agrees with this? You can put a hand up if you want. Is it
I'm
okay?
saying yes because I do.
think it is okay. Agree that it is okay.
Yep, so I'm keeping this statement kind of vague.
I feel like there are a lot of factors.
But
Not
yeah,
that yes.
Can we say agree, but?
Yeah, feel free to. So you're agree, disagree, or unsure. It's okay to use the word bitch in a joking manner.
Yeah, I would say I agree.
Okay, so if you agree, share a little bit about why you chose that.
Well, I feel like if you're using it in a joking manner, it's got to be with someone that you know.
Okay.
At least on a level where they're gonna understand that you're not saying it in some sort of negative way.
And I also think it matters who you're with. So, you know, Alexis and I are good friends with Grace, right? If I am telling a story about something Alexis did and I say, like, and then this bitch goes and, you know, does whatever, and it's just the three of us,
We all have a good laugh.
we all have a good laugh, and she knows that, you know,
Right.
I don't mean it. But I probably wouldn't say the same thing in a larger group or if we're with different company, because I don't know why, just because I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Or they might not understand.
And because it's not okay for them to say it, because they're
Yes.
not your friend.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the other thing to point out is that we're all women here. So you're kind of asking, like, is it okay to say, use bitch, jokingly?
Yeah, if there were a man here,
Yeah.
would he agree?
Right, I'm wondering from their perspective. What
I
would
think
they
he
say.
would.
Unlikely.
I feel the same.
And
too,
I would agree that he should not.
Yes.
But
Okay.
it's all hypothetical.
Tell me a bit more about that.
Because I feel like it's kind of like too often if you hear a man using that word. I mean, every time I remember hearing a man use that word, it is to put a woman down, to be derogatory. Like, I don't think that there's any way for a man to say that word that doesn't make me cringe a little bit. Even if it's someone that I am close with and that I know is joking, it just doesn't feel like the kind of joke a man can make.
Yeah.
It somehow, I think, with women become a term of endearment between women who are close with
I
one
can't
another.
argue with that. Yeah.
You know, but yeah, if a man said it, or depending on the context, like I had a student yell in my face once, "You're a bitch." Well, that was not a term of endearment.
Right, yes.
Right.
But again, when you're with, your group,
Right.
where you
Yeah.
know it doesn't have any negative connotations.
I think one thing I always think about is if, like, Mean Girl, I'm sure we've all seen Mean Girls.
Mhm.
So you know how that part where they're in the assembly and she's like, if we all call each other bitch, then it just makes it okay for men to do it. I do think about that, and I think that's why I wouldn't make that joke in mixed company, say.
Mhm.
I would only make that joke in a group of other women because I agree. I don't want men to think that it makes it okay for them to do it, even if it is okay for us to do it.
So you just saying that kind of made so much sense because in high school, my friend used to like joke around and call I didn't really call her bitch so much as she called like me and like other like of our friends, even guys, bitch. And I was like fine, like it was fine. It was just like joking around. But as soon as one of our guy friends called me bitch, I was like, don't ever call me that. And it's probably because she said it in front of them that they thought it was okay, I guess.
Yeah, maybe.
And I obviously said it in front of them too, so he thought it was okay.
But it's
was
okay
not.
for you and it's okay for her, but it's not okay for
It's
them.
not okay for
Yeah.
them.
I think there's also a kind of, if you're like, oh, my bitches. Like, for me to say that, it's like a term of endearment. It's like,
Yeah.
my lovely ladies, my bitches. Whereas if a man says it, it's like,
It has a lot of other.
it has a lot of other meanings.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the way the word is used has to do with like one, the intent of it. Like you said, is it a term of endearment or is it I'm using this to put you down as a woman?
Yeah.
I'm using it to degrade you. And also like each individual is going to impact them differently. Some women may be called a bitch by anyone and not be affected by it, but others may really take that personally. So I think the two things that really I go back to with that have to do with like intent and impact.
Or like, is it a reclaimed word? Maybe, maybe not.
Mhm.
Maybe it's becoming, maybe it's not. I don't know.
And I have kind of a follow-up question to that. Does it make a difference if the word is directed towards a male or a female? So kind of flip this. Think about the context of the word bitch being used directed towards a male. What do you think that kind of brings up? What kind of meanings does that have?
Usually it means like they're weak and lesser
Mhm.
because they're acting like a
Like
woman.
a woman.
Yep, I feel like I can hear my husband and his friends like, I don't even know what we were doing. Don't be a bitch about it.
Right.
Like that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a different meaning at that point, And not even like, if you're using it towards a woman, it means like you're angry and you're cranky and you're this and you're that. But if you're using it against a man, it's very much like, it's very different.
I feel like it's almost interesting because if you're a man and you call someone, oh, like, don't be a little bitch, it's almost like, oh, you're weak and you're, like weak. But if you a lot of times if someone calls a woman a bitch and they mean it in a derogatory way, I think they often say it because she's strong,
Yeah.
which is kind of an interesting, like,
Yeah.
it means the total opposite.
Mhm.
It means that you're outspoken, that you're standing up for what you want, that
Mhm.
you're
You're
going
angry about
for,
something,
you're angry about
yeah.
something and you're not letting it go. And so that makes you bitchy. But if you're a man and you're bitchy, it's the opposite.
You're being a
It's
girl.
that,
Cowardly.
you're cowardly. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I think something, again, I'm not the expert on like pop culture, but I think one thing, like a term that's kind of come up recently is like bad bitch.
Okay,
So like you'll
yeah.
refer to someone as
Yeah.
bad bitch. kind of
Or
talking
like head bitch in charge.
Head bitch
is
in
like
charge,
a big
yeah.
thing.
There we go. There's one in our presence.
We got a bad bitch right here.
Which I think goes back to Alexis's point of like kind of trying to reclaim,
Yeah.
reclaim a word.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's been used against as, you're
Yeah.
angry, you won't if you're standing up for yourself, you're bitchy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But if you're like, well, I'm gonna just own that and I'm not gonna let this go and I'm gonna be strong about this and whatever else, that kind of goes to bad bitch and so on
Yeah.
and so forth.
Well, I think we can see in like a lot of different groups or cultures where words have been reclaimed. In the African American community, you know, the word queer has really been reclaimed, and you know, it is a powerful term now, an identifying term that's not this negative,
It's
hateful
kind of a
thing
neutral,
anymore.
descriptive word.
Exactly. So, you know, bitch may kind of be the same thing. Women have kind of reclaimed this, so it's not this negative, hurtful thing anymore. All right, cool. Thanks for sharing. The next thing we're going to do is a word association game. You'll see some fun paper and pens here. I just kind of put it here in case anyone prefers to write. You can feel free to. What we're going to kind of look at is we'll start with men and then move on to women, not intentionally, but and I'm curious, kind of stereotypically, what are words that we associate with men?
Negative, positive,
So-
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. So let's think, you know, we're all like enlightened, progressive individuals, so we obviously, you know, have,
Or at least we hope.
right? I sure hope so. So we all have our opinions, but kind of think stereotypically in, you know, our society, what are words that we typically associate with being a man?
Strong.
Yep, you can write some down, you can shout them out, whatever you prefer.
Assertive.
Assertive, yeah.
Okay, so like descriptive words or like things I would call men.
It can be either. It's kind of open-ended
Like
here.
a bro.
Okay,
Or like a fuckboy.
okay.
One that I-
Yeah, yeah.
Masculine.
yeah.
Athletic.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
In charge.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
gonna say like leader.
Yeah, like boss. You
Yeah.
never.
Yes.
You know how people will jokingly call someone boss?
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
you got it, boss.
Yeah.
No one ever says that to women. They only say it to men.
I was so
Okay.
excited the first time someone said that to me.
Okay, I lied. Someone said it to you.
Just once. But then like everyone kind of like made fun of me.
Yeah,
for
like
being so
chief, boss. Like those
Yeah.
are words that men only get called.
Sport.
Okay.
Sport.
All right,
Yes.
all right. Think about like what are some typical jobs that only men would have? Some jobs that are stereotypically men's jobs.
Electrician.
Construction
Okay.
worker.
Mm-hmm.
I would say technology too, though.
Yeah.
Like,
technology.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously not that only men would have, but stereotypically,
Yeah.
you think of the computer programmer or the IT guy
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
right,
Law
yeah,
enforcement, that's another one.
Law
That's another big
enforcement.
one.
yeah, military,
Politics.
Lawyer.
politics for sure.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? What are some other words?
Dude.
So,
Like, I just had a son, so I try really hard to not do the like, oh, you're so strong, and you're, you know, like
Mhm.
all the time. But other people do. You know, they call him buddy, and they call, you know, which I don't think they would do. Not that it's a bad thing, just I don't think you look at little babies and go like, hey, buddy. It's a boy thing.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll give you that. That's what I called my little brother when he was a baby.
Yeah.
And I still call him. He's like almost
Yeah.
30, and I still call him that. So.
Yeah.
And I usually say handsome.
Handsome,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Boys and then like
Yeah.
we'll get to it later.
So just kind of thinking back to some of the words, I heard like masculine, you know, boss, strong, leader,
Aggressive.
things like that, aggressive.
Mhm.
Yeah. So if we think about if a man, again, in our society isn't living up to this, what are some terms that we hear them described as at that point? If they're not being masculine, if they're not being a leader, if they're not being strong, if they're not being aggressive, what do we hear them called?
Pussy.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's like the first word
Fat.
that comes to my mind.
Mhm.
Sissy.
Mm-hmm.
Gay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What else?
I think lately, although this might be like a male and a female thing, but like you hear the word snowflake thrown around a lot these days.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's kind of a genderless.
It is
thing to
kind
say,
of, but I feel like it embodies that idea of
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, you're like whiny and
You're being a baby.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, neckbeard.
You're being a little girl. Oh, neckbeards are terrible.
What about bitch? Are men called bitch
Yeah.
in that case?
Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any other words we can think of?
I mean, I feel like there are definitely other words that mean vagina or just
Mhm.
vagina
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
men are definitely called when they're not
Yeah.
being all of the stereotypical men
Exactly.
things.
So again, when we're thinking like as a society of words that are going to degrade men, several of those words are like directly connected to females. You know,
Absolutely.
bitch, pussy, all these
Yeah.
things. In order to insult you and degrade you,
Douchebag.
Yeah. In order to degrade you, we're going to use female terms and female, nouns to put you down. So now let's kind of flip this again. We're going to do the same thing, but think about women. So what are stereotypically words that we associate with kind of what a woman should be? The ideal woman, what should she be?
Delicate.
Mm-hmm.
Graceful.
Mousy.
Okay.
Pretty.
Pretty.
Yeah.
Don't take up
All the
space
beautiful
in
and
so
thin
many
and
different ways.
yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Don't take up space.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate a bit on pretty? What exactly do you mean by that?
I mean the whole like Barbie idea. You know, that there's a standard, and that pretty is here. You know, as opposed to, you know, just I don't know what I'm trying to say. That there's a standard that if someone doesn't know you, that they judge you by that standard, I think.
And I think the idea too that you're supposed to, even if you're not like Barbie doll pretty, you're supposed to try.
Yeah.
In one way or another, pretty is supposed to be
Or
your
you're
next.
supposed to want it.
Right.
Even
Pretty
if you're
is
not trying, that's
pretty
what
is
you're supposed
supposed
to
to
want.
be the thing
Yeah,
that you
know what?
aspire to.
It took me a really long time because I mean there are days clearly that I'm just like whatever, you know, and I throw my hair up. Like this week I've been working in my classroom and I put on sweatpants, t-shirt, hair up, whatever, and I'm passing teachers in the hallway that are all done up and stuff. And there is something in me that's like, oh my god, I'm a terrible
I'm
person.
supposed to do that.
Yeah.
You know, but then the majority of me is you know at the point in my life where I'm like whatever.
Right.
But there is still that like, ooh, I should have put on mascara today,
Yeah.
or I should, you know.
Complacent.
Complacent?
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm also gonna say smart, and I know that doesn't seem like something that we always think of, but I think that we have this idea that like girls are smart and boys work hard.
Yes.
Okay.
So when you like have girls in your classroom, especially when they're young, and they're intelligent and they're asking questions and they're just smart. Oh, you're so smart. Like you're just smart. But when it's boys, you know, the idea is that like, oh, they're working really hard at it and they're trying and they're like, I noticed that a lot when I was working with especially younger kids when I worked in the public library. That the idea seemed to be that if you're a woman and you're intelligent, that it just is innate and like you're lucky. And if you're a boy, it means that you worked really hard for it. And I think that becomes a problem later in their life. I don't know if that's exactly what you're asking right now, but I have seen that so many times, and I feel like the idea is that if you're a woman, you're either smart or dumb, but you're not working towards one or the other. You know what I mean? You're not.
Yeah.
You just are. You were just born that way.
Yep. No, I think it's a good point to bring up because it kind of shows that, you know, a male and a female student can be equally smart, but this male is going to get credit for working really hard for it, and you went above and beyond, and you did this, you were so great, and the girl will just say, you're smart, good job.
Right.
So kind of giving that male that extra boost and that extra recognition and credit for doing the same work and the same effort as a
But
female.
also at the same time being like, well, you're not smart enough, so you had to work really hard for that. Like, I feel like it could go both ways.
Mhm.
So, did you guys ever? I had to read this article when I was doing my psych undergrad, and it did talk about these terms saying hardworking or smart with kids, and how if you told a kid that you're working really hard, they were more likely to put in the effort and get better like grades and just do better like in participation. And if you just told a kid they were smart, they just felt like they didn't have to do anything, so they didn't work hard. And it really affects.
I really agree with. I mean, from my own personal experience, I agree with that because I was that kid who was like in the gifted and talented and the whatever, and thought I was going to be president. And when it got hard, I couldn't cope with it, and I didn't do well, and I didn't put in the work because it was like, oh well,
You're
I
supposed
just
to be smart.
I just don't know how to do it.
I'm not smart in this area.
And
so.
when I look at men like my husband, who is a very intelligent man, but is a problem solver, and I think learned the opposite, which was
You're hard.
you're gonna figure out a way. You're gonna work hard,
Yeah.
and like, I often wonder what I could have achieved.
Yeah. And I always tell my kids, you're
You
working
know.
so hard.
Yes, I often wonder in high school and college, what I could have achieved if I had had a different mentality of,
Yeah.
like, I can figure this out, I can do the work I can, as opposed to, this is the stuff that I'm smart at or good at,
Mm-hmm.
and this stuff I'm not smart at, so I can't do it.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear kind of how you see some of these male and female roles like appear within your students. But I want to flip real fast to think about, we just pointed out a lot of the words that we think of as kind of normalized females. The mousy, the smart, the pretty, all these things. We're going to do the same thing that we did with men. What happens when we flip this? If a woman is not living up to those ideals, what is she called?
A bitch.
Exactly what I was gonna say, right? That's
Yeah,
the
I
first
mean,
one.
a bitch is
You're
the
not
main
complacent,
one.
you're a bitch.
Yeah.
And lesbian for like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
pretty
Okay.
thing.
Yes. Or like frumpy or
Yeah.
messy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Sloppy.
Yeah, sloppy.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't wear makeup, so you don't take care of yourself, or
Yeah.
I feel like that's another whole can of worms. Like
Like the
That you don't
self-care.
care.
you don't care, but if you like wear too much makeup, you're trying too hard, or
Okay.
like you really just can't effing away.
Well,
Either
yeah,
way
if you have
with
to wear
that.
makeup where it looks natural now.
Yes.
Where it looks like you're not wearing
Yeah.
makeup. Yeah. I mean, I hate this word, but you get cunt a lot.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like a lot of the words that you all just brought up attack like a woman's appearance.
Mhm.
But if we kind of think back to what we brought up about men, I feel like none of those negative words that we said attacked their appearance. So I think that's kind of something interesting to consider that really speaks to the value of what a female looks like in our society and how much that kind of weighs on females and how much, it affects our lives and our experiences, which we'll definitely talk about in a bit. But, you guys kind of started to bring this up when you were talking about like your own experiences in classrooms and how, teachers spoke to you. But think about some of these words that we just used to describe like males and females. And, we work with a few different age groups in a few different settings. But think about how do you see some of your students at different age ranges, like already fitting into some of these, or inversely already kind of stepping out of some of these, and what does that look like? You don't have to use names or anything.
Well, I think
but
it's because I see. So, I've been working with the middle school, high school group for a while. So, like the kids that I see in high school now, I saw as middle schoolers,
Mhm.
and kind of how they've grown and how things are different, and how like middle school girls have a really tough time because they're just like being a girl is tough, but like being a middle school girl is really tough because everyone is a jerk, and everyone's like fighting, and there's gossip, and there's rumors, and this and that. And I've definitely had conversations with students, like while I'm trying to do conflict resolution groups, where they're like, "Well, she's a slut, and I don't respect that." I'm like, "Why do you care?" And they look at me, they're like, "Well, because you're supposed to care." I'm like, "You care what she does? Like, has she negatively hurt you in some way? Like with those things?" No. Like I don't know really how to describe that, but like has her,
Has it
being a
affected
slut hurt
you?
you? Has it
Right.
affected you? No. Like,
Mhm.
what do you care what she does? Like, but I think that there's kind of like a concept of, that's not okay and that's not acceptable, and I'm gonna call you on that, and I'm gonna dislike you for that. And I find that that's something that happens with high schoolers where it's now kind of creeping to a bit younger as they're becoming more sexualized younger, which is a pattern I've seen over the last decade, which I'm sure everyone's seen over the last decade if you work with adolescents. But I do think that there's definitely kind of a developmental thing. I also feel like with information that's available and technology and kind of seeing more of the world, things are actually maybe a little better, because I feel like they have access to seeing a lot of different kinds of people and seeing that it's okay to do this or that, or they have a lot more access and a lot more exposure than we did, 15 years ago. So I think that that's also in some ways been kind of negative, but in a lot of ways it's been really positive.
I would agree that I think, the social media stuff is really concerning in terms of like we see a lot of cyberbullying, and we see the Instagram perfect models and the girls who think that they're supposed to look the way that things look on Instagram, and that people's life is the way it looks on Instagram or Facebook or Snapchat. And we know that that's not true. Like, you curate your online presence to look great. I post really cute pictures of my baby. It's pretty rare that I post pictures of him screaming and crying.
But it happens.
It happens. But if you looked at it, you would be like, well, this is perfect. And I think that the reality is, as adults, we understand that, but our kids don't always understand that. But I do think you're right, that it also gives them opportunities to join communities and participate in groups and activities online that they would never have been able to imagine. And so it makes their community much bigger than it ever could have been before. And especially Alexis and I teach at the same school, or work at the same school, and it's a small community, very small, teeny. So for these kids to have that opportunity, I think is starting to affect a lot of things, including the way they perceive gender roles. And we've seen a lot of transgender students come through our school in the past few years, and surprisingly to me, it has not been really an issue. That's not to say that these things don't happen. I definitely still see kids fall into these roles every single day. The boys have to be macho, a lot of them, not all of them. And that starts in middle school, where they have to be thugs, or they have to be macho, or they have to be, whatever.
Athletic stars.
Yeah, the girls tend to fall into two groups. One being the good girls that are academic and involved and doing the things, and the other being the girls who are the sluts, that whose focus
wait for that.
Because they're not.
I know.
Right.
But whose focus is on boys and their appearance and social life and Instagram and their makeup, and all that stuff. It's like not too common to find a girl who falls, in my experience, who falls somewhere in between. It seems like there are only two options available to them. I don't know if that's the same with the boys. I know there are a lot of boys who feel like they need to fall into that stereotype.
There's less pressure for them.
But I do think I do think there are a lot more boys who are just kind of flying under the radar and are just being themselves and doing their thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
For the girls, there's much more pressure, I think is the right word, to
Constant
fall
criticism.
into
Yeah.
one of those categories.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting hearing what you guys are saying, because in my job, I've never worked at a typical public school. I worked at a specialized school before, and now I am contracted in a Catholic school. So at the Catholic school, there's rules, and there's more rules for girls than boys, obviously. And I know, shocking, right?
What are the dress code and stuff?
Well, there's
you mean?
the dress code, but girls can't wear makeup, and they're not really supposed to wear crazy nail polish.
Can boys wear makeup?
I think the expectation is we don't have to make our rules before
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily that there's more rules for girls.
There
They're
are
just
rules,
unspoken.
they just affect
Unspoken.
girls.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
No, I mean, I never actually read okay, so I guess that's another thing. I never actually read the rules, but the way that the other SLP presented to me was that the girls can't wear makeup. She said the girls can't wear makeup. So,
But what she meant was no one can wear makeup.
yeah, I guess so.
But it didn't occur
Except for
to
the
her.
teachers.
But it didn't occur to her to say no one can wear makeup.
Right.
She's like, girls can
No,
wear makeup.
yeah, and we actually did have a student that came out as transgender this past school year, and the kids in the class, the boys especially, were bullying this student, and so the parents decided to take, I don't know which pronoun they want, so I'm not going to say, they took them out, and the head person said, the head nun, the sister, she said, well, thank God for that. Which is so sad to hear.
Oh gosh.
And,
I mean, but
but also, thank
but
God.
because
Yeah,
Because it's not in that
I
awful
guess that's
environment.
why she said it.
Yeah,
Now,
she
she's
said
saying
thank
thank God to get this kid away and
Yeah.
have a better life? Is that what she
Oh
meant?
no.
No,
No,
she
Get
was
out
saying,
of
thank
school.
God, let's get this child away from
I don't
us.
want to deal with whatever this is.
Yes, this is a headache. I don't want to deal with
Is
it.
that
Yeah.
middle school or high school?
Middle school.
See, and I feel like I've noticed from working 6 to 12 for all those years that kids are relentless in middle school. By the time they get to high school, they don't really care.
No.
What I mean,
I
the
agree.
girls still are kind of petty and whatever, but like if you're gay.
Okay.
Now it wasn't always that way. I feel like when we were in high school, it was a little more like taboo.
Yes.
You know what I mean? To come out, to be trans. I couldn't even think of anyone who was transgender
No.
at my high
No.
school. You know what I mean? But I feel like I've always noticed that middle school, yes,
Yeah.
ton of bullying. And then by high school, I don't know what happens, but they don't seem to care as much. It's more of the like, that doesn't affect me.
Yeah.
There's a lot more friend drama in friend groups, I feel like, in middle school than there
Yeah.
is, like
Significantly.
worrying about what else is going on,
Yeah.
with other people.
I actually have a really funny story about that. One day I was sitting in my office and Fred Giorgetti comes down and he's like,
Names.
in his state. He's a teacher. He's telling me a story about what he
I
said
guess
in
that's
his,
true.
what happened in his classroom. I won't say the names of the students, but he comes in and he's like, okay, so this thing just happened in my class and I just need to like tell someone and talk whatever. So apparently one of his students, who will now be a senior, but this is when they were in 8th grade, said to Fred, hey, I'd like to make an announcement at the end of class. And he's like, whatever, this is like April, like maybe it's for the club, like he has no idea. This person gets up at the end of class and goes, I just wanted to let everyone know that I'm a lesbian. And Fred was like, so what I did was I said, thank you for sharing, like I validated it, and I was like, thank you for trusting us and sharing that with us. The kids were like, so is it like time to pack up and leave? Like they could not have cared less. And he was like, did I do the right thing? I'm like, you did exactly the right thing. Did anybody, react negatively? And he's like, no, they did not care at all. And I was like, okay, so I guess we're
I
good.
think in society it's so accepted now.
I think the interesting thing is, like, we've been talking about gender roles, and I feel like it's interesting that sexuality seems to have, I don't want to say like evolved, but like we seem to be much more accepting of the idea of like people having sort of like different sexual orientations and their sexuality, but like the gender roles are still pretty rigid. Like,
I don't know if it would have been the same situation if a boy had come up and said, I'm gay.
Right.
I don't think the boys would have
That's
dealt
true.
with that well,
Yes.
but the boys were like, whatever, I
Yeah.
don't care. And the girls were like, whatever, I don't care.
Yeah.
Had it been a boy being like, I'm gay, that might have gone very differently.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that I heard a lot of talk about middle school. We've all worked with middle schoolers, and we know they're a very special population of folks. But I do think it's interesting because I think that's such an important age group where you have the opportunity to really, I think, make a huge impact on both boys and girls when it comes to kind of having these conversations. So talking to them about what gender roles are, talking to them about violence against women, having all of these conversations about acceptance and coexisting. Because middle school, you think about hormones, you think about developmental levels, all of these things that are happening in middle school. It's such a crazy important time. But I think it's also interesting that I've heard that they're almost two extremes. That those gender roles do exist in a very extreme way. You still have the girls who need to, wear the makeup and be on Instagram, and the boys who have to be the macho athletes. But then we also have this kind of other extreme where they're accepting of this fluid nature that they see in some of their classmates. So I think a lot of it kind of speaks to like individualized pressures that they feel individually. I think especially with females, and kind of what that pressure looks like for them, as opposed to what's happening around them. Which again, in middle school, I think you're very self-absorbed. And you're very focused on what's happening in your own life. So I think that kind of definitely affects some of their reactions to the topics that you all brought up, for sure. So we're going to kind of transition into something that definitely can affect students and youth, and definitely does. But I think something that we kind of see as educators and professionals and females at a different level, and that's sexual harassment. So a quick statistic to share. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard some of the statistics about sexual harassment, but when 1 in 3 women between the ages of 18 to 34, which is what we have in this room, have been sexually harassed at work, and 81% of women have been verbally sexually harassed. So that's jokes, that's comments, that's mentions about their body or their clothing. And I think that's a really profound statistic when we think about the number of women in the workforce. And we'll kind of go into women in the workforce in general and some of the things, historical and social that even lead to sexual harassment and contribute to it. But I'm interested, does that statistic surprise any of you?
No.
Not
No?
the slightest, no.
I'm surprised it's not higher, I guess.
Okay.
Because, I don't know, I'm sure we all have a story in here.
Yes.
But is that what's reported? Like, you think about
Right.
how many?
Yeah,
Never,
absolutely.
because I can think of a few things that I know. I didn't go to the, my boss or anything,
Right.
and I brushed it off. But
Because my boss was the one making the comment.
Well, I think you bring up a good point because, there are studies and, reports that show or unfortunately don't show, a lot of the barriers that women face to reporting sexual harassment do have to do with the fact that there is not a culture in their workplace that, allows or supports this. There's not a
I
supervisor
cannot
that brings this
imagine
up.
trying to report sexual harassment at my job.
Mhm.
I can't.
We had a seminar on it today. Like, it was part of our training today about sexual
And I s-
harassment and affirmative action.
Still don't believe that if I went to any of the people that they claim I could go to, that anything would be done at all.
Interesting.
I don't.
So, my last job, it was like 3 of us.
Okay.
And we contracted with a specialized school. I feel like there I probably would not have said anything because it was so small. And actually, one of the speech therapists there was sexually harassed multiple times, and we told her to go to the principal, but she wouldn't. And then none of us did either. None of us reported what we saw going on either. At my job now, because there's so many layers, I think I would report it.
Interesting.
I have to say, in the district where I work, last year, one of the administrators was let go for sexual harassment because it was
It was such a problem.
because it was reported, and then one person reported, and then more reported, and at first it was like an action plan. The administrator couldn't be in a closed door meeting and couldn't do this and couldn't do that, and the person still couldn't follow it, and so they were actually let go. On the grounds of sexual harassment. So
Were those students?
no, it was
Oh, okay.
teachers. Teachers were feeling sexually harassed were sexually harassed by an administrator.
So,
Can I ask a follow-up question? Was it a male administrator?
Yes.
So in high school, when he wasn't actually my teacher, but I went to him for help sometimes for math. He would prey on some students, and I was one of those students. And someone's boyfriend came forward, and then an investigation happened, and I wasn't called in to be asked about anything. So I was kind of happy I wasn't because I was too afraid to say anything, even if I was to be called in. But people were too afraid. So nothing came of it.
Wow. A lot of studies have shown that if you look at the psychological and emotional and physical effects of sexual harassment on women, the way they're documented, and the way that documentation should be used to advocate for change in policy, in laws, in treatment of women, and the ability to bring charges. You can look at forms of PTSD that can arise from this. You look at job loss and the financial impact of that. Physical things, weight loss, sleeplessness, all of these things that can stem from women being sexually harassed. And the, job loss especially because a lot of women, are afraid or feel unable to be able to report this. And either they are let go if they do report it, or they voluntarily resign because of the culture that's there. So there really are, I think, in any workplace, a lot of things that contribute to women not being able to do this. And that's the same for our youth, I think. We definitely see. I kind of have a scenario that I want to put out there for you all that's definitely tailored towards educators. So I'll share this scenario, and then I have a few kind of listed immediate options that I'll share. And you all can choose some of these options. You can share your others, but I'd definitely like to hear some feedback on kind of what you think of the scenario, how you feel about some of these options. So, You're in the teacher's room at work with several of your colleagues, and a fellow female teacher walks into the room. As she does, you hear several of the male employees in the room make sexually suggestive comments about her clothing and physical appearance. They also start singing the song Hot for Teacher. Your colleague is obviously getting upset, but no one in the group is saying anything. So there's our scenario. A few immediate options that you have. Would you keep quiet? Would you call the men out on their inappropriate and illegal behavior? Would you report the incident to an administrator or supervisor? Would you console your colleague and tell her to ignore their comments? Or would you do something else?
I feel like I would do a combination. I feel like it also
Okay.
depends on, am I a first year teacher and they're all, they've been here a couple of years.
Okay.
Because I feel like, I've been at my job for almost a decade, and if that happened, I would 100% call them out and console my coworker. Like, I probably would do everything except for be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also been there for almost a decade. If I was a brand new teacher, I might not feel comfortable doing that because, there are a lot of things that could go wrong with that. I'm not comfortable there. I don't know these people. Like, I might decide that nobody's going to care about it or listen to me or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it depends on like if I knew them well enough, I would call them out.
Mm-hmm.
But if I didn't, then I would probably just console that teacher and then kind of try to say hey, why don't you go to a higher up with this because it's not right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like if I saw that that the other teacher was clearly upset
Mm-hmm.
by it, then I would definitely call them out. But I don't know even now, in my own school where I work currently, that I would report it to anyone because, like I said, I think the answer that I would get would be they were just joking around, or, well, that person needs to come talk to me themselves, or any number of other things to excuse it away.
Mm-hmm. What else?
I would like to think that I would intervene, but I would probably stay quiet. Unless it was the person who was harassing was someone I knew very well.
Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of this kind of goes back to the very start of our conversation when we kind of talked about, if you're a bystander and you're on a train and you see someone being harassed, this is almost the identical situation, but this is a colleague. And again, I tried to keep this kind of vague. I didn't say this colleague. They could be your best friend. They could be a total stranger. They could be, but in general, I think it kind of speaks to, what we feel. And do any of you feel like, would you be victimized if you stood up for this person? Would you make yourself a target? Do you think that's an element that would prevent you from kind of speaking up or stepping in?
Yeah, you'd be
I
like
think-
the school pariah.
It's hard to say. I think that I would like to think that any people who would treat someone this way are not people that I particularly care how you feel about me anyway.
Yeah.
So go ahead and hate me, die mad about it. I don't care.
Kick rocks.
What?
Kick rocks.
Yeah, whatever. I'm thinking about the people that I work with that would be the people that would do this, and I'm literally these are the people that I hide from at lunch because I don't want to sit in the faculty room with them. I know these men, and I don't care what they think of me. That being said, I'm in a position to be able to say that. I also work in my own department of one person, so I don't need to necessarily collaborate with them. I don't, I'm not in a situation where I need these people necessarily to.
You don't have to have a working relationship with these people.
A
daily.
very basic working
Yeah.
relationship. I feel like the other thing is being on the train scenario, to me, and this is awful, but there's a sense of immediate danger there where I don't know if this woman is going to get off this train and this person is going to follow her. I don't know, this person is a stranger. I don't know if he's going to attack her
I don't
or
know if
whatever.
he's got a gun. I don't know
Right.
if he's got a knife.
So on the one hand, it makes me less likely to intervene, and on the other hand, it makes me more likely because it's she
More
could be in
dangerous.
danger. Whereas at work, and especially if they're people that I know, they're saying things and they're joking around and it's not appropriate and it's wrong. But in my head, I'm thinking, there's no real danger.
No one's gonna
Mhm.
die,
Like,
probably.
this woman is gonna make her copies or whatever she's doing and like go back to her classroom, and like I don't think anyone's gonna attack her, or so that makes me in some ways less likely to intervene, because it's like, well, like that sucks, but
I think it makes me more likely to intervene because I know those men probably won't hurt me. Like, I know them and we're in a safe, enclosed environment where right now they're not going to come at me with anything because there are too many witnesses and they could lose their job, and they're probably too attached to a number of things to do that. There's more at stake for them. They're not anonymous here. Like,
right.
there's a lot at stake for them if they come back at me with, physical violence, whereas that's more likely to happen in public, per se.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, like, as children, we always hear, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words may never hurt me. But I think when you grow up and you're an adult, I think that takes on a very different context. When you think about the power of words, whether it's a female, whether it's a man speaking to you, that goes back to when we were talking about the word bitch. I think there are a lot of connections about the power of words and how they can impact you, especially in terms of sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is not just, I'm grabbing your butt, I'm touching you, I'm stroking you. A lot of it can be that verbal. It can be, I'm leaving a note, I'm sending an inappropriate email. And I think a lot of that has to do with this element of power and control that feeds into almost all of the underlying issues that exist when we talk about like gender roles and all of these different things. Women coming into the workplace, if we think historically, women's realm and women's territory, it was in the home. It was in the kitchen. It was in the baby's nursery. And when they stepped into the workplace, that created a lot of anger and resentment. And a lot of that, if you look historically, that is the root of kind of how some of this sexual harassment, especially in the workplace, specifically in the workplace, came up. And I think that still exists to some extent, especially in specific workplaces.
I was told once by a very close male colleague that I got ahead in my career because I was young and cute,
I've heard that many times.
which totally discounted the fact that I'd worked my ass off for 10 years to get where I was. And I didn't let it bother me too much because I was really confident in the work that I had done. But young and cute. And I thought, really, is that it? Is that all? But in hindsight, you know what? I was succeeding more than that person than he was. And so part of me wonders, in hindsight, if it was the whole idea of, they need to be the boss. They need to be more successful, and he wasn't.
I also think there's some of you who kind of like reclaimed that. Like, I had a college roommate who like maybe definitely got her job in like a top earning financial field because she was beautiful and like dressed well, and I feel like that helped her career. But I also feel like she knew that it would help her career, and she's like, all right, F these guys, like, I'm gonna own this.
So two things. At my first job, when I worked at a public library, the guy who was the director was this total like old man perv. And I would definitely dress a certain way if I needed to go in and ask for like money for a budget, or like I would. And the thing is, like, I know I should feel bad about it, but honestly, if that's gonna be your basis for like making decisions at work, then you're a moron, and I'll then like you get what you deserve, kind of thing. So yes, I have taken advantage of it in my lifetime for sure. And the other thing is, at my current job, I did once hear someone say, someone was coming out of an evaluation meeting, and she is our current union president, brilliant teacher, hardworking, organized. Like, you could never fault this person for not having everything done to the T the way it's supposed to be. Just wonderful, and happens to be pretty. She looks like a Barbie doll. I don't know how else to explain it. and she owns it. She likes to dress that way, and look that way, and not in an inappropriate way, but just that's her aesthetic. And she came out of an evaluation meeting, and a male teacher was going in, and they said something along the lines of like, "Oh, well, if I dress like that and walk like that, then, do I get a good evaluation too?" And she heard them. I heard them. She heard them. And we were both just, the implication that you got a good evaluation because of the way you look.
Right.
When
It's not that
you're
your hard
working,
work.
you're one of the most hardworking people I know. And, the administrator, as they're shutting the door, is laughing at this joke. So, like, Sarah, I know, exactly what you're saying, because I do think that there's a lot of this, like Grace, you were saying, there's a lot of this, like, animosity and anger about the idea that, like, women are excelling, and men need to find a justification for it. They can't possibly be just working harder and doing better. So it must be that they're cute, they're young, they dress a certain way, because otherwise they could never get a better score than I do, or make more money than I do, or do better than I do.
Yeah, and women in the STEM field, like, the guys in the STEM field would, like, say they're just getting that position because they need to fill some quota for the minorities. And I don't think that's very fair, obviously, but there's also the flip side, like in the speech field, there's not a lot of men, and one of my classmates, who was a guy, said, like, well, I'm going to apply to this, and I'm going to get it because I'm a man.
It's the same thing. Like, I feel like that's very true for
Yeah.
counselors, therapists.
It's like-
I mean, I'm a
social workers.
librarian.
Yeah.
So,
Like,
I know
my
exactly what
coworker
you're saying.
just left. He finished his master's. He worked really hard. He's got this, like, cool job, but, like, he is in demand because he is a black man.
Mm-hmm.
And the demand for that specific sort of relationship is something, like, I can't do that.
You can't provide that.
I can't provide that. I'm not a black man. And, like, it's wonderful because I feel like he has worked so hard and he's done a lot and it's really great, but, like, he is the minority.
Yes.
Not necessarily because of his race, but because of his gender in my field. Absolutely.
I think across, a majority of work fields, we can see that there's a difference between, males and females, and obviously when it comes to, the pay gap, the wage gap, we're all very aware of that. But there have been folks that have advocated for, like you mentioned, almost an affirmative action type of policy to really directly target and recruit more women for fields like STEM. That's been a huge initiative. I know in nonprofits I've worked for, a lot of the focus has been on programs that work specifically with young females to get them involved in these fields where they are underrepresented. And we don't necessarily think of that, a middle schooler doing a robotics experiment, a middle school girl. We don't think of that as affirmative action. But in necessity, that really is kind of the beginning stages of, we're going to intentionally target this group and bring them into this field because, there are a lot of deficits. And this kind of intentional recruitment and targeting is really a way to start to even some of that and really start to kind of level some of these, like, power issues that exist and, have always existed within the workforce. So it's definitely something that I think is good to consider when we have these conversations.
I do feel like, though, after a while, when that does start to even out, young girls will see that as a possibility. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like if you talk to a 5-year-old now, they're not going to say that they want to be a 5-year-old girl. They're not going to say that they want to be an engineer. I mean, maybe not a 5-year-old boy either, but you see what I'm getting at. Like, I feel like as that starts to even out, it'll become more the norm. And it'll be just a possibility for girls instead of, like, let me play with my baby dolls in my fake kitchen. It might be, let me play with my fake tool set, and that's okay. And vice versa, for that matter. Boys that want to play with a little baby doll or dress up or whatever, like, just becomes more the norm, I think. And then even kids see it as a possibility.
Definitely. So I think that's kind of a good segue into you know, a lot of these things that we've discussed, especially this last subject, we've kind of talked about like as our level as professionals and as females. But kind of think about all of these topics, you know, gender roles and sexual harassment in terms of your students. And what do you think are some of the most dire needs, some of the things that need to be addressed up front with the students you work with? And then we'll kind of talk about strategies for that.
I think you need education on what sexual harassment is. I feel like that's a huge thing I run into, especially with the high schoolers, because they're like, well, they're just jokes, and there's this and there's that, but it's like, but you're uncomfortable. Like, these things aren't okay. Like, it's not okay that the guys do this to you, or like, you know, whatever is happening. I feel like there's just a lot of lack of understanding of like what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel also like, and I don't know if I work with my students in a capacity to see this in the way that I see it in like the national conversation, but like toxic masculinity is such a problem in middle schools and high schools, because we see all the time that men end up hurting, young men end up hurting people, and older men too, but you gotta start somewhere. Because of this sense of entitlement, because of this sense of, you know, the world owing them something, women owing them something, needing to prove themselves, all of that stuff, you end up with, you know, abusive relationships. You end up with, we've seen a lot of school shootings that have occurred because allegedly, and I guess we don't always know the whole story, a girl turned me down. We see a lot of women losing their lives or ending up battered because they wouldn't go out on a date with me. They wouldn't, and that stuff all starts young. I mean, the idea that we teach girls that, oh, he pulls your hair because he likes you, that stuff, we still tell girls that stuff. You know, oh, he teases you because he likes you.
And I feel like that started to make girls feel better about it, which is awful in every way.
Right, because the worse you treat me,
because it's
the
going
more
to
you
happen,
like me.
so we'll just make them feel okay.
So I think that's a huge issue that needs to be addressed at all the levels for youth, but especially young, because a lot of times I feel like by the time I see these kids in high school, it's almost too late. It's not too late, and we still should be educating them, and we still should be doing things, but it really needs to start young because it is so ingrained in our society.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should also educate parents.
I was just about to say a lot of it starts
because, like, jumping off of you, like, I can just, you know, you think of like the parents who are telling their kids, like, oh, that means they like you, like, they need to be taught about like how that's actually damaging and it's not true.
Or like boys crying, like suck it up, don't cry.
Yeah.
Like,
And parents don't know. I mean, so I have a 5-month-old baby, and I am a parent, right? Crazy.
Wow.
And you know, we didn't know before he was born if he was going to be a boy or a girl. And I honestly didn't know how to feel about it because it was like, well, if I have a girl, her life will be harder. So like that sucks. So like maybe I hope it's a boy because like the best thing you can be in this country is a white boy. Not the best thing. The most
Put you up there.
The easiest thing you can be
Yeah.
is a white male. But my husband, who's a white male, was like, you know, I kind of hope he's not a boy because like the worst thing you can be is a white male. Like they're causing all the problems, and I don't know how to raise a responsible male. And he's right. We don't. I mean, we're aware of it, and we're trying, and we're reading, and we're, you know. But even so, like I don't really know what to avoid and what to say and what not to say and how I'm gonna react as he grows up and things happen and things just come out of your mouth because it's the way you were raised or you know it's what society dictates or expects or like you know whatever. It's like terrifying. I don't think there was a good, you know, there wasn't a good option. I'm thrilled that I have a son. But it's like, you know, if it's a girl, like, I know about being a girl, and I know about girl power, and I know about empowering her, and, like, making, But on the other hand, like, I don't want her to feel scared every time she gets in an elevator, which I do. So, like, maybe it's good that I have a boy, you know, and I think that parents need help.
Yeah.
And that's coming from someone that knows she needs help, but the parents of my students, very often,
They don't
this isn't even on their, like,
I know.
and for some of them, rightfully, I don't want to say rightfully so, but when what's on your radar is, can I put food on the table, or is the power going to go out, you know, this is not
It's not priority.
the issue. So your kid is learning it from other kids, or TV, or video games, or music, or, you know, whatever it is.
Oh, so that reminds me. What were we watching? I think it was Parks and Rec, actually, Parks and Recreation. Anne said no to a guy, and the guy was like, okay, and I was like, that would never happen in real life. And then my husband Dan was like, well, they're kind of trying to like show what should be normal on TV, and that way men who are watching will like hopefully react that way. And I was like, oh my god.
Well, I think
Let's get married. That was great.
I think what you both said kind of speaks to, you know, one being a female raising a son, and also, you know, what you kind of brought about a man seeing another man kind of treat a woman right. You know, it's been shown that in whether it's a community group or like a discussion group like this, you know, for men, it's most effective to have another man having these conversations. And I think that there's a few reasons for that. You know, one is definitely they can relate to them, but another really has to do with, you know, some of the masculinity issues, you know, that we've touched on a little bit, where, you know, men feel so stuck in this idea that they cannot show feelings, that they cannot be vulnerable, that they need to have this masculine persona. And when they have another man show them that, hey, it's okay to show your feelings, hey, it's okay to react politely and calmly to a female who turns you down. When they see these examples of other men behaving like that, you know, especially at some of these younger ages, it has a profound impact. But I think I definitely like to hear your thoughts on this. It's also interesting to think about, you know, the field of, you know, violence prevention against women was really pioneered by women advocating for themselves, because obviously no one else would. You know, but as it's progressed, it's been identified that there needs to be space for men to come into this, like I just said, because they can have a really important role in this. But then we look at, is this going to be another instance of men kind of overpowering women, and kind of what that looks like for them to work together. So if we think about especially working with our male students, and Alexis, I think you'd have an interesting perspective on this, you know, with the specific work that you do. If we look at working with our male students to address this, what do you think is the most effective way to talk to a group of middle school boys about violence against women and preventing that?
I think it absolutely has to come from other men. I feel like that is such a huge priority. Someone who's relatable, someone who understands what is appropriate and what is okay, and gives them permission to feel their feelings or talk about things that are hard, or who corrects them. Like, I remember one time my coworker who just left was talking to some middle school boys who were like calling this other middle school girl a slut. It was like this whole bullying thing. And he said to them something basically like, you know, what if that was your sister, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, so I'm going to school you real quick about how they should just respect her because she's a person and not because they're related to women. And that never occurred to him because he had never heard that before. So I think a lot of that is like men being willing to listen to women and accept that they maybe don't know everything. Like there was...
Well, actually, Alex.
Yeah, what up? What's going on?
No, I was just, you know.
Yes. Oh, you were mansplaining.
Yes.
Me, thank
Yeah.
you. Because I don't feel like there are a lot of men who really like. I feel like good, for lack of a better word, good men have a hard time understanding that there are bad men. Like, for instance, my music teacher when I was a child, like 4th and 5th grade, was like very handsy, very touchy-feely. made me uncomfortable, made the other girl uncomfortable. It was like a whole thing. I told my dad about it, but because he doesn't sexualize children, he's like, well, he was loving, like it was kind, it was warm, like. But then my mother heard about it and she flipped out for obvious reasons. But like it had never occurred to my father that was maybe, sexual in nature, because he would never think of that. So I think that sometimes there's a problem with like men not knowing that like other men are terrible.
My father-in-law is like probably the second nicest man in the world after my husband. But he kisses everyone on the lips. Everyone.
Oh yeah.
And it really bothers me. And I finally just had to tell him, like,
This bothers me.
it bothers me. It's weird, right?
It's weird.
Yeah.
And his family, like, this is what they did. You might have known other people who, like, this is what they do. Yeah. And it never occurred to him for that to even be
Uncomfortable.
like uncomfortable, but I was like,
this isn't comfortable for me.
it's not. And I can't imagine, I mean, I am part of your family, but I hope that you were not doing that
To strangers.
I don't know why you would be, but I also don't know why you're kissing anyone on the lips who's not your wife. So, like, I think you're right that some men are very well intentioned and kind, but also live in such privilege and safety that it does not even occur to them to think otherwise.
No, not at all.
Yeah. My friend's grandfather is one of those people who kisses people on the lips. And one day, he tried to kiss me, like, we were hugging goodbye and everything.
Exactly.
He tried to kiss me,
Yes.
like, at least, like, 5 times.
Oh,
and every single time I would,
that
give
gets to
him
the
the
point
cheek.
that's creepy, I think.
And he was like, why do you keep doing that? Are you uncomfortable with that? I'm like, what are you talking about? Because I don't kiss people on the lips. Like,
No, it's
I
weird.
figured he was going for the cheek. And he was like, you don't kiss people. Why don't you kiss people? And I was like, I don't know. I didn't grow up like that. And he's like, no, kiss me. And now I just kiss him every time. And I feel really awkward about it. Because he's like
Now
my
just do it because it was
grandfather.
awkward.
Yeah. But he's like my
Wow.
grandfather. So, like, now I feel like I don't see him that often. So it's not too bad. But it's just like, I can't go back. And
I went there,
I
now
don't
there's
feel
no
good
return.
about that,
Yeah.
I don't feel good that I couldn't state, like, this is my comfortable boundary.
Yeah.
Because I was too afraid to, like, offend him.
If I didn't, I mean, it's my father-in-law. I have to see him all the time for the rest of.
Oh, yeah. And he's
One of our
like,
lives.
super nice. Like, he would make fun of me for the rest of my life. And I said, like,
Yeah.
I just don't
No,
wanna
he
do
felt awful. He was devastated that he had been making me uncomfortable.
So that's an example of someone who like doesn't know what they're doing and then is like, oh,
that. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it was like, oh,
I'm so
shoot,
sorry. I didn't
my
know
bad.
that was a thing.
Yeah.
Right.
But I don't think that I think there are very few men, even some of my favorite men in the world, who can
Except that
listen
they're
to a
wrong.
woman, tell them, we're not going to tell boys that they should care about women because they have moms. Or whatever. They can't handle being told by a woman.
Well, I was ideally hoping that our male friend would be here, but he was being a good father and attending to his child, so kudos to him. But I think one thing that's really important, especially when we have this conversation, is that we can't kind of point this finger at every male.
No,
We can't
absolutely
make
not.
this general statement that applies to all of them as perpetrators, the same way that all females are not necessarily victims. The percentage of females who are victims is
Higher.
much higher than I'm sure the percentage of males who are perpetrators. But I think it's important both ways that we don't set a conversation up to kind of do that. And I think we've done a good job at that tonight. So kudos, ladies. But just kind of like wrapping things up and drawing conclusions. What do you think are some of the kind of takeaways from the conversation that could be applicable to kind of going back into your workplaces with your colleagues or with your students that could kind of, again, I spoke about the Mentors in Violence Prevention program as we started this. So kind of some of the things that we modeled and discussed, how do you think those could kind of go back into the work that you'll be doing in what, a week? A week, pretty soon, go back to
Less
school?
than a week.
All right.
Something I had thought about a lot last year, and you saw the project that I did at my spring concert, was, and my girls were more apt to participate in that than the boys were. And the project was basically anonymously, type your struggle. Then they anonymously responded to one another, and it was like a support thing, and then we put it together with a song. Anyway, since the girls were more apt to respond, and I read a lot of the things that were written, I was already thinking, how do I get them to realize their worth? Because I think, self-esteem and worth, I think kind of are the same, but kind of are not. And I don't think these girls, but for a lot of the reasons that we talked about, they don't realize their worth. Like, they feel a lot of the things that we've been saying, and that's sad to me, because they're like 15. And I probably felt it too when I was 15. Middle school's terrible. High school is a little less terrible, it's still a struggle and everything. So something that I was already thinking about, and this conversation reiterated it, was to start some kind of after-school group. I don't know if it'll happen or how often or how formally, but that's something that popped into my head as we were talking.
Nice. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else have any kind of closing thoughts or questions or feelings?
I'm gonna continue. So like I'm limited since I'm just contracted with these schools, so I can't do something like after school. I'm
Sure,
not like that engrossed in the schools. But with especially my middle schoolers and my elementary school kids, just like reinforcing, like kind of being like the referee because I usually see them in groups, and there have been times where a guy in the group would overtake the conversation or like repeatedly ask this girl, why she missed art or something the other day. And so I think I'm going to continue to be the referee and also keep this in mind, just like kind of instead of just being the referee, to like actually like say more definitive things. Like, I don't really think she likes that because of this. You're doing this. Stop doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like just being more concrete and not like, okay, it's not your turn to talk anymore, it's her turn. Like, actually being concrete with what I'm telling them.
Definitely.
So over the summer, I advise a peer mentoring groups where the high schoolers mentor the sixth graders, and my orientation is pretty standard year to year. But this year, I actually last summer, I added in a bit more about like the meaning of words and the words you use, and not with the sixth graders, but with your peers, and how are you behaving? Like, you're a mentor, but like if you're a dude and you're calling all your friends a pussy, like you're kind of terrible. Like, don't do that. But last school year, I actually had a sixth grader like hurl like a really angry racial slur at one of my mentors, and so I didn't realize that I had to add in like, how do you manage when someone else says something like that to you? Or like if you are facilitating a group of sixth graders and one says it to you or to another kid, like how do you shut down something like that? And so I added a bit more in with that and kind of, without using the word pussy, I explained kind of like meaning of words. Like, this is and they knew exactly what I was talking about. I was like, this is a word that you hear often. This is a word you typically hear boys calling other boys, and they mean that they're weak or I'm like, just expand your vocabulary. Like, say what you actually mean instead of saying you're a woman. And all the girls were like, oh, like it had never, because they use it too, and it had never occurred to them that like that's what that means. And until you kind of like switch it on, even if you just plant the seed a little bit, it's going to come up more, and they're going to be like, oh, like that makes me more uncomfortable than it did 6 weeks ago, before I heard that. So I think there's definitely an element of just kind of like, just little things planting and here and there, and kind of just making the space where like, you know what, that's not going to happen here. Like, we're just not going to do that. Like, what you said is this, and this is wrong, and we're not going to do that. And just shutting, like, and I said to them, I'm like, you don't owe them an explanation. It's tell them that, it's racist, it's sexist, it's this, it's wrong, and that we're not going to talk to each other like that, and just leave it at that. You don't need to explain to them, like, the philosophical or like, the history of, like, why you shouldn't say the N-word. Like, you don't know that, like, they know that.
Yeah.
You don't have to explain that. Just shut it down. And I think that, they're young and they're still, like, adjusting to that sort of leadership role, so it might take a little while for some of them. For others, not so much. So we'll see.
Yeah, definitely.
And I would say, like, for me, I'm in the library, which is its own kind of unique
Like its own ecosystem.
in a school. It is. And I've often said that, being the school librarian, and as far as teachers go, is like being the school bartender. Because everyone kind of comes in and, like, hangs on your desk and tells you, like, you just hear all the, like, you're just working and everyone's just telling you all the things, I hear everything. But it's also true of students, because I try very hard to make the library comfortable, and it's sort of this extra space for them, because it's a school space and it's an academic space, but it's not a classroom, and it's rarely structured. And we get kids that come in a lot and just kind of hang out, either because it's before school and the homeroom hasn't started, because they're coming at lunch, because they're coming after school, they have a free period, whatever it is. And they often maybe forget that I'm there, or just don't realize that I can hear everything there. It's not that big. And I know that I need to do a better job of walking the line between, I want them to feel comfortable to have a space in the school that is where they can talk to their friends and be themselves, and not think that, oh, Miss Mallory's constantly listening to us and what, And on the other hand, doing a better job of addressing the kinds of things that we've been talking about here today, of saying, you can't use that, you shouldn't use that word.
Yeah.
Or pulling the boys aside and saying, not an appropriate way to act.
Yeah.
Or pulling the girls aside and saying, does that happen often? Does he always act, or vice versa? I mean, again, we don't want to villainize men. I mean, there are also situations where pulling a boy aside and saying, does that happen often? It's a balancing act, and it's one that I'm admittedly still working on, because when you're working with young people, everything can collapse in it. It's a house of cards. Everything can collapse in an instant, and you can think that you are doing the thing that you need to do to be an advocate and help them, and it can be the thing that prevents that kid from ever coming back and talking to you, because Ms. Mallory, you got in my business, and it wasn't that big of a deal, and it was, So I would love to have more conversations like this and talk to more people about these issues, because I am still finding how to address that and how to deal with that.
I think that's a problem you have, which is a credit to how you managed the media center, and kind of how it is a safe space and a comfortable space for students, and they feel comfortable with you, and they, I feel like that's a problem. No offense, that you created, but it's not necessarily
right. And
a terrible thing.
It's not a bad
It's not a
problem.
bad-
Catch-22.
It's
Yes,
not a bad
absolutely.
problem by any means, but it's one that, like, now that
Yes.
that I have built that reputation for, this is a place where we can go. It also needs to be a place where you get educated and are held
Yes.
accountable.
Well, I think it's really, like, valuable and encouraging to hear, like, as educators, that you all are aware of, like, the building blocks that have to happen. Because we obviously, once kids, turn the tassel on their hat and walk out the door, we may not see many of them. So we don't know what the after effect of their lives look like. But, I think it's really important to consider that what we're doing now, the way we talk to our middle school boys, our high school boys, when we pull them aside and say, hey, you can't treat a woman like that, or do you need to talk to someone, or if we have a male colleague do that could prevent 10 years from now them committing violence towards women. So I think we'll never know kind of the lasting effect of what this is, but I think the building blocks that, like, we as educators can do now, especially with that middle school and high school group, are, like, really valuable in contributing to, like, men developing into the men we want them to be, and also men, like, not perpetrating this violence against women. So it's like super important, and kudos to you all. Right? Any kind of closing feelings, thoughts, questions?
I like having this talk.
Cool.
I
yeah,
could
I'm
say-
glad to hear that.
Yeah.
In hours more worth of things.
Yeah.
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
Like,
Do you want to hear a sad toxic masculinity story about my nephew who's 6?
Okay, let's throw it in at the end.
So he is 6. He'll be 7 in January. He's just started first grade today. Cutest little nugget, very, very polite, very sweet. I guess they were talking about like maybe he'll play some sports, and he decides he wants to play hockey. His mother is Canadian, and all of his cousins are Canadian. So I'm like, well, obviously. But my mother asked him, why is it that you want to play hockey? And he was kind of like, well, I want to learn that like, you get hit and you don't have to cry every time. And I was like, oh my god, like it broke my little heart. Like if you get punched in the face, like your automatic physical reaction is just to cry. Like that's how that works. But like what has he experienced that like that was his, I need to learn how to not cry when I'm hurt.
Mm-hmm.
do you want to hear an opposite story?
Yes, please.
My nephew was 5 and is obsessed with princesses and Disney
Yes.
princesses. And he started kindergarten today, and he did pick an Avengers backpack this year, but that I think is just what he's into right now. Last year he had a Princess Elena backpack and lunchbox, and for Christmas the only thing he wanted was a Princess Elena dress. And the heels and the tiara, and he got them for Christmas, wore them around all Christmas Day, and then took them to Disney World and wore them to the princess breakfast, dressed in the full princess outfit, and not one person said
No, not one person.
said
That's
anything
amazing.
but kind things to him the entire day.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
That's amazing. That made me very happy. Thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah.
So it
That's
is
where I
changing.
hope-
Yes.
I think
As
it's
a
changing.
society, we're going. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like important that shows us that yes, we talked about middle school and high school, but this can start as early as kindergarten.
This kid
and
was
6
4
years
and 5.
old. The way we speak to little boys, and the way we encourage them, and the way we support them, positively or negatively, that's gonna confirm who they are in middle school and then who they are in high
Yeah.
school. And so I think really, when we talk about prevention, towards violence against women, the earlier we start, the better. So like these conversations, conversations with men, conversations with families, with students, with colleagues, I think are all like incredibly valuable to this work. So, all right, cool. Thanks, friends.
Yeah.
All right, and.
And